Luckily, I have a good reference in the garage, so I can be close to him and try to steal some secrets. 6 years inside the Ducati factory system should have softened Francesco Bagnaia. It should have made him careful. It should have made him political. It should have taught him to speak like a man protecting a seat. Instead, after the season that destroyed his rhythm, his confidence, and his public image, Bagnaia shows up calm. Not calm like someone who has accepted his place. Calm like someone who has finally understood the real game. Because 2025 was not just a tough year. It was the first time the Ducati factory learned what it feels like when the same motorcycle turns into two different realities. One rider rides the GP25 to a title with 5 rounds remaining. The other spends the year chasing front end feeling like it is a rumor. And the uncomfortable question hanging over 2026 is not whether Pecco is still good. It is whether Pecco finally understands why he lost. If he does, then 2026 becomes a war of execution from day one. If he doesn't, then Ducati's most polished champion becomes the most replaceable asset in the paddock, right before the 2027 reset detonates the entire market. If this is true, then everything fans believe begins to fall apart. Bagnaia has never been a man who sells you hope with volume. He sells you threat with restraint. That is why the line matters. He wants to be competitive from the start. Not by Jerez, not after Mugello. From the first sessions, from the first tire, from the first base setting. That sentence is a confession and a declaration at the same time. Confession. 2025 was a season where he arrived late to his own championship. Every weekend was recovery. Every Friday was damage control. Every race was a compromise between what the bike wanted and what he needed. He could win on certain tracks, on certain days when the conditions aligned, but he could not build continuity. He could not build pressure. And without continuity, a rider like Marc Márquez doesn't just beat you, he erases you. Declaration: 2026 will not be approached like a long season. It will be approached like a short war, because Bagnaia knows what changes in a final year regulations campaign. Teams stop learning for later. They learn for now. They stop carrying problems. They cut them. They stop giving riders time. They start counting points like deadlines. The winter break gave Bagnaia a rare gift. Silence. Not fan silence. Factory silence. The kind of silence where the garage stops pretending this was just adaptation issues and starts asking who made what decisions, when, and why. He also gave the world something he rarely gives it, an open admission that the champion next to him is the reference. Not one of the references. Not we can learn from each other. The reference. In Ducati terms, that is not humility. That is survival intelligence. Because in 2026, the Ducati factory is not a romantic home. It is a proving ground with 2 clocks ticking. Clock 1 is internal. The factory is built to serve the rider who turns weekends into trophies. Ducati has done it for years. It did it when the system was Bagnaia's. It did it again when Márquez walked in and took the architecture by force. Clock 2 is external. 2027 is coming. Michelin exits, the sport moves into an equal-spec 850cc era where the old advantages are not guaranteed. Every contract, every future seat, every manufacturer plan is being written with that uncertainty in mind. Bagnaia is calm because he finally sees what calm really is. Leverage without panic. He knows most contracts expire. He knows the rider market will be a bloodbath. He knows that if Ducati has to choose a nucleus for the next era, it will choose the man who is already winning in the current era. And that is why he is saying the quiet part out loud. I will follow Marc's steps. I will steal his secrets. I will use his reference to rebuild my base. That is not submission. That is an attack plan. But this is where the entire story snaps. Because the hidden contradiction is brutal. Bagnaia's collapse in 2025 was not just technical, it was cultural. It was the first time Bagnaia had to accept that Ducati's internal truth might not match the VR46 worldview he grew up inside. The political betrayal is not a person with a knife, it is a system with a narrative. When Bagnaia entered 2025, the The paddock had been trained to see him as the stable champion and Márquez as the risky variable. The VR46 orbit, the Italian ecosystem, and the comfortable logic of our house, our language, our process made that interpretation feel safe, and that safety is exactly what got him hurt. The technical flaw is obvious. The GP25 front-end feel was not there for him. But the deeper flaw was believing that Ducati would solve it for him in time, like the old era, where the factory's prime directive was keeping his confidence intact. Rider psychology rupture. Bagnaia realized too late that the new prime directive is winning, and the rider who wins gets the gravity. Bagnaia's Steel Secrets line is not a joke. It is the sound of a champion recalibrating his identity in public, because the old identity failed him. Bagnaia's greatest weapon has always been smoothness. Not just smooth inputs, smooth problem solving, smooth emotional regulation, smooth weekends where the lap times look boring and the trophies look inevitable. That is why 2025 looked so violent when it went wrong. It was not dramatic crashes and chaos. It was something more damaging, a season-long absence of his signature. A champion who couldn't produce the same line twice on the same tire. A rider who couldn't trust the front to load the way his instincts demand. And when a rider like Bagnaia loses front trust, he loses the thing that makes him unique in the Ducati house. Ducati riders can be fast. Ducati riders can be aggressive. Ducati riders can be brilliant for one lap. Bagnaia's value is that he can build an entire race on precision without burning the tire. That value looked compromised in 2025. So why is the calm important? Because Bagnaia's calm is not passive. It is calculated. The message is simple. He has stopped treating Márquez as a variable to manage and started treating him as a truth to exploit. This is where the controversial part enters, and Ducati knows it too. Bagnaia misjudged Márquez last year. Not on talent, on method. The paddock read the early 2025 atmosphere as Bagnaia's house, Márquez's adaptation. That reading wasn't just external, it seeped inside. It infected expectations. It suggested that Márquez would have to earn authority through time. But Márquez does not earn authority through time. He takes it through outcomes. And if there was a cultural influence that made Bagnaia underestimate how fast that takeover happens, it was the comfort of the Italian institutional bubble around him. The VR46 ecosystem has produced champions, but it also produces a specific kind of confidence. Confidence that the paddock moves at the speed of relationships, not the speed of brutal results. That mistake is the same mistake Marco Bezzecchi made in 2024 when he was still calibrating his own identity in the Ducati orbit. He misread the hierarchy, misread the consequences of being close to greatness without owning it, and the result was a year where he looked lost until he rebuilt himself away from that psychological gravity. Bagnaia did not rebuild away. He had to rebuild inside the same garage, while the reference stood 3 meters away and won. That is why the phrase, "from day one," matters more than any contract talk. Bagnaia understands he cannot allow Márquez to build an early point structure. Because Márquez defending a title is not a myth, it is an operating mode. History says he doesn't just defend. He suffocates challengers early, so they spend the season chasing air. And now Bagnaia is openly telling you he will use Márquez as a data weapon. Not to admire him, to catch him. Everything you thought you understood stops working here. Because fans want to interpret Bagnaia's calm as acceptance. But in a Ducati garage, calm can be a sign that the rider has stopped negotiating with the problem. He has decided the problem is the environment, and he will adapt to it faster than it can adapt to him. The advantage flips when Bagnaia stops trying to fix the GP25 feeling, like it is a single missing setting, and starts rebuilding his entire approach around the fact that Márquez can win without his kind of comfort. That exposes Bagnaia's old dependency. He needed the bike to feel right to be ruthless. Márquez does not. So Bagnaia's plan cannot be restore the old Pecco. It has to be build a new Pecco that can execute when the bike is not perfect, when the tire is not ideal, when the weekend is ugly. That is the power reversal. The hero becomes exposed when you realize Bagnaia's past dominance was built on harmony, and harmony is a luxury in a garage with Márquez. The underdog becomes threat when you realize Bagnaia is the one rider on the grid with the technical literacy, the racecraft patience, and the two-title proof to actually turn Ducati's own weapon back on Ducati's new king. This is why the statement must be firm. If there is someone who can fight Márquez directly, it is Bagnaia. Not because of hype, because of matching machinery, matching resources, and a riding style that can translate into repeatable victories when the system is stable. Bezzecchi can threaten, Acosta can explode, Quartararo can qualify on another planet, Alex Márquez can be relentless across a season. But inside the Ducati house, there is no rider with Bagnaia's combination of smoothness and championship discipline. And that matters because Ducati is not just building bikes in 2026. Ducati is building a story. It is building a hierarchy that will decide who enters 2027 as the factory's chosen nucleus. Bagnaia knows he is not an option for Ducati. Ducati already has him under contract for 2026, but the deeper reality is this. Ducati is not emotionally attached to keeping him beyond the point where he stops being a title weapon. If fans can see it, Bagnaia can see it. Stronger. So he is calm because there is nothing left to protect but performance. He also knows that 2026 is the last year of these technical regulations. Fewer new things on the bike. That means fewer excuses and fewer miracles. It becomes a base-building war. The rider who finds a base early will cash it in across a calendar. And now the stakes get ugly. Bagnaia's winter training plan, the emphasis on more laps and more performance thinking, is not a fitness note. It is a strategic pivot. He is trying to compress the learning curve. He is trying to do in testing what he failed to do in a season, build a front-end trust framework. Because in 2025, he chased feeling like it was a mood. In 2026, he must treat it like an engineering target, and if the bike cannot fully deliver it, he must still win. That is why Steel Secrets is the most important phrase. Not because he needs to copy Márquez's riding style, because he needs to copy Márquez's tolerance for imperfection. At this midpoint, there is only one line that matters. GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist. Bagnaia's calm is dangerous for the paddock because it is not hopeful. It is resigned to brutality. He is no longer selling the idea that Ducati will return him to comfort. He is selling the idea that he will fight anyway. But the consequences of that are immediate. First consequence. The Ducati garage becomes a laboratory of psychological warfare. The reference is Márquez, and Bagnaia is now openly declaring he will hunt the reference's method. That means every session becomes comparative. Every data trace becomes a ranking. Every engineer becomes an interpreter of two philosophies. Second consequence. Bagnaia's 2025 collapse stops being treated as a weird season and starts being treated as a warning. Ducati's leadership knows that if its two riders perceive the same bike differently, then Ducati's stability is an illusion. A stable factory needs a stable baseline. When one rider calls it a weapon and the other calls it a problem, the factory's future becomes a negotiation. Third consequence. The rider market will interpret Bagnaia's calm as an exit signal, even if he never says the word. When a champion says he is calm about contracts while pointing at the 2027 regulation change, it reads like a man keeping his options open. And in this paddock, options are a threat to team control. Now the part Ducati hates. Bagnaia's calm makes him harder to manage. Pressure used to trigger his sharpness only after 6 or 7 races. That was the old pattern, when he could afford to build momentum slowly because the reference was not a predator in his own box. Now, the predator is inside the box, so Bagnaia has moved his pressure response forward. He is trying to arrive sharp, not become sharp. That shift can produce 2 outcomes. Outcome 1, Bagnaia becomes the most dangerous version of himself because he stops waiting for the season to teach him and starts dictating terms early. That version can win wars of attrition against anyone, including Márquez, because he can turn Sundays into a points factory. Outcome 2. Bagnaia breaks his own identity by trying to race like a man he is not. If Steel Secrets turns into copy style, he loses the smoothness that makes him lethal. The Ducati is not a bike that forgives confusion. Confusion becomes front-end mistakes. Front-end mistakes become crashes. Crashes become narrative death. That is why the calmness is not soft. It is sharp. It is a controlled burn. And now the part nobody is ready for. The future threat is not just 2026, it is the 2027 trap. Because when Michelin exits and the equal-spec 850cc era arrives, the sport will punish riders who rely on familiarity and reward riders who can rebuild instincts quickly. Ducati's current dominance may not transfer cleanly. Its current power structure may not hold. The factory could walk into 2027 with a fractured internal identity. One rider defined by calculated smoothness and base building, the other defined by aggression, adaptation, and intimidation. If 2026 ends without clarity, Ducati risks entering the new era with a civil war still burning. And in a reset year, internal friction is not drama. It is lost time. Lost time becomes lost championships. This is why Bagnaia's contract calm is not comfort. It is preparation for a world where Ducati might not be the only logical home, and where Bagnaia's value is not loyal factory champion, but proven title operator who can rebuild. That is the threat to Ducati's control. Bagnaia is no longer begging to be kept. He is positioning himself to be chosen by whoever needs him. And the paddock has already seen what happens when factories assume loyalty is permanent. Riders leave, projects die, hierarchies flip. Bagnaia is quiet, but the implication is violent. He will not allow 2025 to be the story of his decline. He will force 2026 to be the story of his correction. So what does this episode actually lock into place? It locks the Ducati fracture as a real war, not a fan fantasy. Ducati runs 4 factory-spec motorcycles in 2026, but the factory team is still the nucleus. The factory team is still the narrative. And within that nucleus, Bagnaia is no longer the protected champion. He is the challenger inside his own home. It also locks the next arcs into the same gravity field. Toprak Razgatlioglu arrives at Pramac Yamaha in 2026, a move that is not about saving Yamaha, but about positioning for the 2027 market. That market will be shaped by who looks adaptable in the final year of the old rules. Pedro Acosta continues to simmer, still winless by Portimao 2025, with KTM's race pace collapse as a recurring trap. And every weekend in 2026 becomes a referendum on whether KTM can build a title platform before the reset wipes the board. Fabio Quartararo, 5 poles in 2025, and growing conflict with Yamaha's V4 stagnation becomes a living symbol of what happens when talent is trapped in a project that cannot deliver. And 2027 whispers Ducati interest into every contract conversation. And inside Aprilia, Marco Bezzecchi's late 2025 surge and 3 wins in the final 10 rounds proves that the next threat can come from outside Ducati's walls, especially when the championship is shaped by who brings a stable base into the last year of a rule set. All of it circles back to the same central truth. 2026 is a transition year only for people who plan to survive. For contenders, it is a war year. It is the last year to prove you belong in the next era. Bagnaia's calm is not a personality note. It is a decision. He is done being embarrassed by a motorcycle he cannot read. He is done being a champion who needs perfect feeling to be ruthless. He is done believing the garage's cultural comfort will protect him from a man who builds power through results. Now the only question left is the one Ducati cannot control. If Bagnaia arrives competitive from day one and forces a season-long battle with the reference, does Ducati still get to choose the future, or does the future choose for them? If Bagnaia fails to compress the learning curve again, does Ducati keep him out of loyalty, or does it treat him like any other asset in a sport entering a reset? And if Márquez defends his crown the way history says he does, what happens to every rider on the grid who thought 2025 was the peak of his dominance, not the beginning? GP24 doesn't cover MotoGP. We document its wars. Subscribe and enlist.